protection and sustainability and also sustainable generation of livelihoods should take place through CBOs. So people's, right, it would like to build the capacities of the people to come together, build their own institutions, and also generate livelihoods through the support that they would be able to mobilize through these agencies. Yeah, and for the CBOs to come up, mobilize them, and come up, and then maybe pursue livelihoods. So another important strategy is to provide professional support. And in fact, and many of these strategies that as I see, including this creation of CBOs and providing professional support, that is also the core of Amul. Of course, one of the success factors, as Dr. Kurian identifies, why Amul succeeded. Of course, there were also farmer leaders, etc. But they collaborated with the professionals who empathized with the needs of the farmers and worked with them together. So that element also is supposed to be here combined. Yeah, so that's all clear in the mission statement of NRLM and all the guidelines, right? Yes, so in terms of promoting livelihoods through the CBOs, so that is the issue. So let me quickly focus on that, and some data also already has been presented. So let me try and see how far NRLM has strategized this and what are the kinds of results that it has so far given. Yeah, this is the typical structure, right? Three-tier structure, and even our Amul model is also three-tier structure: primary and secondary and the tertiary kinds of agencies. So they are sort of integrated. It's a kind of a federated structure. So they share certain responsibilities. There is kind of a flow, up and down flow in terms of resources, etc., across the institutions. So therefore here we have the SHGs at the first level, first tier. Then there are the village organizations, which are federations of these SHGs, and then the cluster level federations, which in turn are the federations of the VIVOs, right? So each is supposed to have its own role and have its own function, and then accordingly access resources, access opportunities, and help the members generate livelihoods, right? So that is the essential feature of this CBO model, right? Yeah, so can this kind of collectives promote livelihoods? Can they do so? Of course, like as I said that I come from Anand, yes, if they are promoted well and if they have the right kind of design and strategies, probably they would succeed in most places. So that's the kind of an hypothesis I would propose here, right? So this NRLM aims at, of course, bringing, in fact, about 9 crore women and the poor under the umbrella of CBOs, and then ensure livelihood protection and promotion through diverse strategies, right? So, and in the past, these collectives, we promoted collectives, cooperatives in various fields. Their results have, except maybe some select models, have not been that positive. So the collectives have not in the past helped to the expected extent, and there were many reasons for that. So therefore, going by the limitations of those earlier collectives for livelihood, and also the kind of insights that we have from Anand, what are the requirements for collectives to promote livelihood in a sustainable way? So I identified probably these conditions. Yes, of course, these the CBOs or any collective, they have the role clarity, right? What they want to do, even if it is livelihood, yes, how they can possibly do. And of course, here we are talking in terms of SHGs, and SHGs have come in the context of microfinance. Microfinance in some sense remains a central part, but they have to go beyond microfinance. They have to become livelihood centric. They need to have adequate capacity and governance, including professional support and well integrated kind of linkages from in the federated structure, the three-tier structure, or even beyond, well integrated functions and linkages, so that will help them to reap the economy, reap the benefits, right? And then also appropriate legal form. If all these probably get combined, maybe those collectives would be in a position to generate, work well and generate possibly good livelihoods, right? Of course, we have tried to see how they have worked here. All these things we have examined. Now, of course, given the time constraints, possibly I will not go into all the aspects. As I said that I draw some of the findings from the study, which adopted multiple methods. It was spread over 8 states, and we had interactions at various levels with various stakeholders, including we conducted household survey of about 4,400 households, both with and without NRLM kind of a situation. And of course, as I said, that our data is in some sense 1 year dated than what Mr. Tulu presented, but of course we have analyzed them. Yeah, so there is of course an impressive progress in terms of numbers, impressive progress in terms of the number of households covered, districts covered, etc. But there are also certain issues, the coverage that has been achieved so far throws up, right? And of course, they still close to 50% now. Our study showed about 43% of the target. And in terms of the estimated rural households, it's about 22%. And though BPL now is not used, if you were to use the BPL households of 2012, it constitutes about 84%. That is because, of course, there are certain issues in the selection and identification which gives these kinds of ratios, right? And of course, in terms of the CBOs at different levels, yes, the 3 primary CBOs, and at the same time, there are also other kinds of CBOs called producers organizations which are coming up, which are some kind of a diversified organizations, because SHGs and other linked organizations function primarily to channelize resources. But if there are livelihoods to be taken up, those livelihoods to be addressed by the producers organizations which are promoted separately. And they are coming up in the recent past, and their numbers so far as compared to SHGs and all is very limited, these livelihood groups. And in terms of the inclusion, because NRLM, unlike other poverty alleviation programs, is a kind of a saturation model, universalization. It wants to cover every BPL or the poor household of all types, socially, economically, geographically, all of them to be brought under this fold of the CBOs, and they are able to access the benefits that these CBOs would be able to provide. Yeah, so, and therefore, and it's supposed to be an inclusive model. And in terms of inclusion, of course, our results shows that, yes, though there are certain good results, but again, there are shortfalls in terms of coverage of the weaker sections, because microfinance kind of models tend to exclude the weakest, poorer sections, though there are newer strategies to bring in poorest of poor and others, but still gap remains, right? And physically also, qualitatively also gap remains. That's what our study shows. And in terms of the working of these 3 layers of organizations, and especially in terms of generation of livelihoods, right? Of course, SHGs are now the platform on which these structures are being built. And SHGs, yes, the numbers we all generally understand. Of course, one difference that we observed in terms of NRLM SHGs and the other SHGs, since there is dedicated parallelly supposed structure is there, compared to even now the bankers would say that yes, these SHGs probably are different from the SGSY SHGs. Yeah, just quickly, STSY SHGs. And so they're quite active, pursuing savings, credit, and such related activities quite fairly vigorously, right? Fairly vigorously. And then also even able to access banks. So the second tier of organizations like VIVOs, they are also into multiple activities, largely facilitating savings and credit and bank linkage. But when it comes to, of course, they're also into some good social activities, addressing social issues of women and the community there. But of course, when it comes to livelihood, they still lag behind. They are doing various livelihood activities, but that is only, I would say, not in terms of the depth or in terms of the outreach, that is still limited. So therefore, and then, of course, SHG bank linkage is one of the major things that has happened. NRLM has pushed the bank linkage to a significant extent, and that results can be seen, but still a lot of gap remains. On an average, of course, even with all the push, on an average, an household would get about 18,000, a member would get 18,000, and that is the key resource for their livelihood. So we can imagine what possibly, of course, there are other resources to be accessed, but in terms of bank linkage, so bank linkage, and in terms of impact, yeah, what our study showed, yes, between the two, there is some significant difference between the control and the treatment. but not so high enough that these people based on the last 3-4 years of interventions, that they would immediately cross whatever the poverty lines that they are there, international standard or Indian standards, right? So therefore, as livelihood institutions, there are various needs, as our study shows. So these are some of the needs that have emerged from the SBOs, that CBOs, and they need to be addressed. So therefore, as CBOs mobilizing the poor, there is some good results, though there are gaps. And the first step of organizing them into savings and credit groups and initially accessing savings, and as microfinance institutions, they have done relatively well compared to past programs. But as livelihood institutions, to quickly conclude, they still have a long way to go. They need support. As I said, those are the conditions that need to be met. First phase has been largely in terms of mobilization. Livelihood only is taking shape or being given impetus only now. And as I said, that Amul for me remains as one of the models to reach that has to be sustained, right? And possibly with these strategies, these CBOs one day would be able to maybe stand something like what Amul stands in Anand, as a livelihood promotion institution for the farmers on a sustainable basis. With that, I close. Thank you very much. Sorry, Chairman, for exceeding my time.
Thank you. So we have seen last 2 decades in which we have reached half the targeted households under SHGs, and I think we can't afford to spend 2 decades more to cover the balance half. So even if we reach, say, 95% in next 5 years or so, that will be a great achievement. Now, from the state, Mr. Meshram is here from State Planning Board, Tamil Nadu.
Good afternoon to all. I thank Niti Ayak for giving this opportunity. Thank Chair also. My presentation will primarily focus on state-specific intervention which effectively addressed livelihood issues and generation of employment, which ultimately a direct talk on poverty in Tamil Nadu. Tamil Nadu is one of the pioneer states in tackling poverty in a more systematic way through implementation of various programs and schemes specific to targeted groups. I think it is a literature. I need not explain what's sustainable. And this also we have discussed a lot since morning. What is poverty? And in Tamil Nadu, we already launched various programs under Vision 2023 with 15 lakh crore investment for the period 2012 to 2023. And we have planned to achieve eradicate poverty by 2023. This is well ahead of SDG target, because our poverty level right now is as per 2011 census around 11%, but still I think it could have come down to single digit. So this is the trend at national level since 70s to latest census. And this is the Tamil Nadu trend. You could see that poverty rate has come down significantly since 80s. And we are in the 11%. And I think we will be in a position to achieve the SDG goal well ahead of time. So these are the strategies that we employ to address sustainability through various strategies. The main strategy has been shown here. And I will tell some of the selected schemes program that we implemented in our state to address the problem of poverty. And one is distribution of common wasteland to agriculture poorers. This was taken up as a one-time effort in the year 2006. And all identified common wastelands were distributed to landless poor, which benefited a lot to generate or to own assets. It's one important program. And this is free distribution of milk animals, goats and sheep. This is one of the important program initiated by government, which was launched in the year 2011. The main purpose is to income generation, addressed only for poor, vulnerable, destitute, and transgenders also. We distributed one milk cow, nearly about 75,000 plus women who are in the poor section benefited. This created a lot of value additionals. Besides employment,